A few years ago, a child was rescued by the police from an unknown location. The authorities did not reveal the boy's identity, but it was confirmed that he was not from the local area. He was a child from a county several hundred kilometers away. According to the boy, he had been kept in a stranger's house for several days. This was not an isolated case. There were a total of 4 such incidents. All of the children were abducted from distant counties, and the police quickly believed these incidents were part of a series of child abductions. The victims were all boys in the lower grades of elementary school. When they were found, there were no obvious external injuries, and no ransom had been demanded from their parents. The rooms where the children were imprisoned were sealed, preventing them from seeing the outside world. However, the rooms had lights inside, and meals were provided on time. Interestingly, the room also had a TV. The police began investigating further, suspecting that these cases were connected. It was also equipped with comics, books, and game consoles. The kidnapper did not even cover her face. She referred to the children by a certain name and encouraged them to talk to her. After a few days, the woman would drive the sleeping children to the suburbs and release them. Based on the testimonies of the victimized children, the police identified a certain woman living in the town. She lived alone in an old house in the suburbs, and interestingly, her own child had been reported missing earlier. The police believed that she committed the crimes because she missed her son. When the police arrived at her house, the woman had already disappeared. However, they found a room that appeared to have been used to imprison the children. Inside, there was a suicide note that read, "I am going to be with my son." There was also a letter of apology to the abducted children. The name the woman used to refer to the boys turned out to be her own son's name. The abducted children all stated that although they were very scared, the woman had been very gentle with them. In the end, both the woman and her son became missing persons. They have never been found to this day. The mysterious nature of the entire event led to extensive media coverage, and the old house at the crime scene became a part of urban legend. Unverified rumors about the house were often spread, such as hearing parent-child conversations at midnight or sightings of the ghost of the missing son. Some claimed to hear knocks on the door or notice the blinding sunlight coming through the gap in the curtains. And as they looked up at the clock, they were left to wonder if time had somehow stopped in that eerie place, where the lines between reality and legend blur. It's not yet clear who's at the door. Is it a guest or a delivery? Is there really a need to be in such a hurry? But the knocking continues. It's here. Reluctantly, I try to crawl out of bed. On the way to the entrance, I glance at the mirror on the wash basin. I should at least look presentable. I open the door. No one. I look around the corridor at the doors lined up on both sides. There's no sign of anyone. The knocking was so clear just now. It can't be a dream, right? But still, there's no one there. I have no choice but to close the door. Yawning, I'm about to go back to sleep. Just as I turn around, the knocking comes again. It's here, it's here. Still, no one. I look around the empty corridor. Is this some child's prank? But my room is located in the middle of the corridor on the 2nd floor of the apartment. Even if someone knocked and immediately ran away, the distance to the stairs should still allow me to catch a glimpse of their back. Or could someone have thrown stones up from below? But there are no small stones on the ground. I stand there, dazed for a while. Then I give up. If you don't know something, you won't figure it out no matter how hard you try. I'll just sleep. But even as I lie down, it feels as though someone is watching me from somewhere. They seem to be enjoying watching the person being tricked. Anyway, I won't open the door again. I crawl back into bed. So annoying. Why won't this person stop bothering me? He'll probably keep knocking until I open the door. Sigh. I have to crawl out of bed again. I tiptoe toward the entrance. Then a question suddenly pops into my mind. If this is a prank, why didn't they use the doorbell intercom? Why knock on the door? I'm going to suddenly open the door to scare him, But before doing so, I peek through the peephole to check the situation outside. Red painted railings and a cement corridor. There's no one. There's nothing that could have made the knocking sound. The mismatch between what I see and what I hear gives me goosebumps. The remaining sleepiness vanishes instantly. The one who made the knocking sound was some invisible thing. Footsteps up the stairs. Come. I immediately become alert. The footsteps are getting closer. A person carrying shopping bags walks past the peephole. It's my neighbor. Without thinking, I open the door. Sorry, I don't really interact with my neighbors. We just greet each other when we meet. I only know that he's a year or two older than me, and he's a student at the same school, but in a different department. What's up? He asked, looking a little curious. He seemed to have just bought lunch and was waiting for me to speak. Did you happen to see anyone knock on my door just now? I asked. No, I didn't, he replied. Oh, I didn't hear anything either. Did you run into anyone on your way upstairs? I pressed. Nope, he said, shaking his head. Did you hear knocking on the door? No. As expected, there was no one in the corridor at all. I nodded, feeling a little unsettled. Oh, I said. Well, now I know. Thanks. Although my neighbor looked confused, he probably didn't want to get involved. I said goodbye, and he headed off. I went inside and closed the door behind me. Back in my room, I decided to forget it for now. I went to the kitchen and made myself a cup of sweet milk. I brought it back to my bedroom and slowly drank it while sitting on the bed. It was a calming ritual, but I couldn't shake the unsettling thought. I should be able to rule out the possibility of a child's prank. It's probably some supernatural thing. For now, it was just the noise disturbance. No other problems had appeared. If I just ignore it, it probably won't be a big deal. But then, a thought crossed my mind. Why exactly today did this happen? Why was there knocking on my door? I'd moved to this apartment for the convenience of being near school, and I'd been living here for a while now. This was the first time such a thing had happened. I hadn't heard of any issues with this room before. If it's not the house, then it must be something about me. Maybe I've somehow attracted something that knocks on doors. After finishing my milk, I picked up my phone and called Kang Jun. This big fan of the supernatural might have some answers. He didn't pick up. He was probably still sleeping. I'll try calling Takahashi then. Takahashi. It's me. Obviously, I know. Get to the point. Looks like I woke him up. So I just said one thing. Can you take me to the place where we did the dare yesterday? Just a few hours ago, Takahashi, Kang Jun, and I had gone to a small town far away in the middle of the night. We went to a haunted place where it's said that the ghosts of women and children appear. Then, we drove a long distance and didn't get home until morning. So the three of us were just now getting out of bed. We didn't see anything in the old house. Nothing happened. But could it be that we were followed back home, just like in the legends? Yesterday that? He asked, sounding a bit confused. What's the reason? I briefly explained what had just happened. If it were Kang Jun, he would definitely be super excited. But Takahashi, I wasn't very confident when I said it. I kept thinking he'd probably say something dismissive and hang up the phone. Of course, if you're free. If not, I'll just take the train and bus there myself, I said, trying not to sound too desperate. Luckily, he didn't hang up. I finished explaining everything in one go, then added, then just take the train and bus. Takahashi didn't immediately reject me, even though the long distance we traveled yesterday made it likely he would. I hadn't really thought it through myself. Why do I want to go again? Something must have attached itself to me. I should probably go to a temple or hospital to treat the auditory hallucinations. That would be more reasonable. But I just can't let it go. I don't know why, but I never felt disgusted, depressed, or annoyed by this. I should say I developed a curiosity to get to the bottom of it, or perhaps a sense of mission. Although I'm not as passionate as Kang Jun, I am still quite interested in these kinds of things. Moreover, the events happened in the place where I live. I have to find out what's going on. Even if it's just a sound disturbance, I can't let it go. Perhaps it's because of this that I didn't feel any sense of danger. I hear the knocking, but there's no one there. I've heard similar ghost stories before. Just as I was thinking maybe I misheard, I turned around. It was behind me. In this situation, the knocking is meant to get you to open the door and let it out. I read a passage about yin-yang doctrine while reading a novel. The house itself is a protective barrier for the homeowner. If a monster isn't invited, it's hard for it to enter. Opening the door yourself is the same as inviting it in. So, the monsters in that book tried every possible way to entice the residents to open the door. But my situation is different. I've opened the door several times already, but the knocking still hasn't stopped. If it's not to annoy me, could it be that it wants me to leave this room? Is it calling me? After thinking it through, I realized the problem lies with the old house we went to yesterday. I really am someone who just goes with the flow. While thinking this, I got out of bed and began preparing to leave. After taking a shower, I received an email on my phone. The subject was strange, and the content was even stranger. If you paid for the gas yesterday as well, I wouldn't mind considering it. A cold shiver ran down my spine. What gas? What did it mean? This is totally Takahashi's style. I smirked and replied, "How much?" Looking out the window, the objects closer to the car passed by faster, while the distant ones passed slower. Although we had just traveled the same road half a day ago, the situation felt completely different now. Back then, it was the darkest part of the night before dawn. Kang Jun was still sleeping like a dead person in the back seat. Takahashi yawned. I shifted my gaze from the window to the seat next to me. Takahashi, holding the steering wheel, still looked very sleepy. This is dangerous. I decided to talk to him. Do you remember what Kang Jun said yesterday? The kidnapping case? I think I remember. It happened a few years ago. I have no memory of it, I replied, but it caused quite a stir at the time. The three of us had sneaked into the yard of that old house. Kang Jun excitedly talked about the details of the kidnapping case, the police search, and the gossip he heard from other places, and so on. I wasn't really listening, but maybe it was because of those things Kang Jun said yesterday that it followed me home. Who? The one I told you about earlier. The one knocking on the door. Was he really yawning, or was he just scoffing at my words? I couldn't tell. I'm really sorry for bothering you with this, I said. I feel bad making you drive for so long. It's fine, I know, Takashi muttered, clearly not thrilled. He must really think it's troublesome from the bottom of his heart. If you hadn't emailed me, it wouldn't have been a problem. By the way, he had asked me for something, and he even calculated the details down to the last cent. Should I say he's precise? Or, I still hadn't asked him, what are your plans once we get there? What Takahashi said clearly caught off guard. I haven't thought it through yet. I paused, thinking, what the heck do you think we'll do? But I really don't know what to do. Maybe I'll sneak inside the house. Last night, we only watched from outside. I'm not sure if anyone is taking care of the house now, I continued. The windows are covered by curtains, but the furniture inside should still be there. After all, the homeowner was just reported missing. Maybe they'll come back one day. That's illegal entry, Takahashi replied flatly. I know, I said, my voice slightly defensive. But it came to my house and called me. Does that count? Who would take your hallucinations as evidence? Takahashi remarked dryly. Anyway, what you're saying is definitely a crime, I pointed out. Exactly. How do you plan to get in? He asked, clearly unimpressed. The front door is locked, I said, already knowing the answer. That's true. I actually tried that yesterday. That door can't be opened without a key. I'll probably have to sneak in through the window. If I knock on the door, they should open it for me. Just kidding. But Takahashi yawned again, seemingly confirming that I really am an idiot. If someone's inside. A few hours later, Takahashi and I finally arrived at the small town. It was just like yesterday. We parked the car at the edge of a residential area, far from the destination. "We're here." "You go on ahead," Takahashi said, unbuckling his seatbelt and reclining the seat, closing his eyes. It looked like he wasn't going to bother with me anymore. He'd sleep until I came back. But soon, Takahashi opened his eyes again. "Hurry up. You know the way, right?" I nodded, but just as I was about to move, I heard it. The knocking sound. It was unmistakable. "Wait a minute. Quiet," I whispered. "Did you hear that?" Takahashi looked at me, confused, but I could see the faint hint of irritation in his eyes. "If we can't solve this today, I'll just go to the hospital," I muttered, leaving Takahashi, who wanted to speak but stopped and got out of the car. I had barely taken a few steps when I heard the sound of the car door opening. I looked back, and there was Takahashi, with a helpless expression, slowly getting out of the car. We walked for a short distance from the residential area, and the old house appeared next to the slope leading up the mountain. This was our second visit. Looking back, the residential area where we parked was clearly visible. There were no other houses nearby. It seemed like it was being shunned, standing alone there. I couldn't make out the details last night, but now I could see the roof, covered with tiles, and the weathered exterior walls. The house must be very old, but the curtains were modern, which suggested someone had lived here not too long ago. If it was just the mother and child living here, the house would be a little too big. We walked through the overgrown yard and reached the entrance. The double wooden doors, with frosted glass panels, stood before us. "What now?" Takahashi asked, his voice tinged with impatience. I pulled hard on the wooden door, but it still wouldn't open. But since it knocked so persistently to get me here, it can't be that simple. "There's no doorknob." I knocked lightly twice. The door slightly swayed, and the glass rattled. There was a response from inside. The sound was muffled but so familiar, it was like the knocking I heard at home. Even if it's a hallucination, I was certain this sound was calling me. I looked back at Takahashi. "Is there any way to get in?" Takahashi looked at the door and then at me, his face full of impatience. "If you really want to get in, there are hundreds of ways." "I guess so," I muttered. "But..." Takahashi shrugged, unfazed. "Let me emphasize again. No matter what method you use to get in, it's still illegal." At this point, I had to be the driver again, and now I had to open the door too. "Really?" Takahashi muttered as he walked up to the door and crouched down. He grabbed the thin metal frame beneath the glass panel at the bottom of the door and grunted as he lifted it up. It was like taking apart a sliding paper door. With one forceful effort, he lifted both doors. Was he planning to just take the door apart? I was still worried about his brute strength when suddenly there was a loud crash. The two doors fell inward at the same time. Takahashi glanced at me and dragged the two doors to one side. This method is especially for doors that won't close properly. It would be faster to break the window, but that would already be illegal. It's better not to destroy anything else. How does he know about this? But I didn't ask him. Before me was a wooden room, about 4 tatami mats in size. On the floor was a randomly placed coiled rope rug. In front of me, and to the left and right, there were doors. "I'll keep watch," Takahashi's voice urged me forward. "Excuse me," I said, taking off my shoes. I stepped inside alone. Only the entrance had light coming in, so the room was very dim. Dust swirled in the air, making my nose itch. I pricked up my ears. There was nothing. The knocking sound had disappeared. What does this mean? Is it telling me to go look for it myself? I suddenly remembered that the room on the west side was used to imprison the children. So, I opened the door on the left. A straight corridor appeared in front of me. There were 3 doors in the corridor. I opened each door to check. A storage room, an empty room, probably a guest room, and the last room. I slowly opened the door. In an instant, It felt like darkness flew out from the crack in the door. Weak light shone through the door, and I could barely see. Did the kidnapped children live here? I found the light switch on the wall, and the soft light immediately filled the room. It seems the power hasn't been cut off yet. I turned on the light without thinking. Was that the right thing to do? But there was no going back now. Looking from the door, on the left side was a large bed. The bookshelf reached almost to the ceiling, filled with neatly arranged books and comics. To the right, in a storage cabinet, were several game consoles. On top was the latest model of LCD TV at the time. On the wall nearby, there was a black figure drawn with crayon. It was probably drawn by a child. Above the graffiti, there was what seemed to be a window, covered with a thin board the same color as the wall. Aside from the lack of windows, it seemed like there would be no inconvenience living here. It could be considered a comfortable children's room. There was a chandelier on the ceiling. It only had a simple white lampshade above the light bulb. It was an incandescent bulb. I nearly lost my mind hearing that. When I looked back, Takahashi was standing behind me. He peered over my shoulder into the room. "You scared me. How did you walk so quietly? You're breaking into someone's home, and you're not going to stomp your feet?" I said, trying to keep calm. "Stop joking around." "That actually makes sense," he replied nonchalantly. "Aren't you supposed to be watching out for me? This is so boring." And then I remembered something Kang Jun had said. "There are some weird things here." Takahashi gently pushed me aside and walked to the center of the room. He began to look around. "What do you think?" he asked. "What do you mean?" "This room. Don't you find something strange about it?" Takahashi said as he pulled a box from under the bed. "Sorry about this." He opened the box, revealing all sorts of toys. "Bones?" I asked, looking at the strange assortment of items. "Don't you think this is too extravagant for a child?" Takahashi remarked. "Though most only children are spoiled, this is still a bit much, don't you think?" I didn't really understand what Takahashi was trying to say. Maybe he was jealous of his younger self? "This is probably for the kidnapped children," I suggested. Takahashi shook his head. "Most of the toys have names written on them," he said, pointing to the stickers. "It should be the nickname the homeowner had for the child." I peeked at the toy box. Almost every toy had a sticker with the name Yuan on it. Almost every toy had a sticker with Yuan or something related to it. Takahashi closed the toy box and put it back in its place. Kang Jun said, "There were 4 or 5 children held here, right?" "That's right," I nodded. Takahashi stood up and continued looking around. "If this is really a room for locking up children, if even one person escapes, this place would definitely be exposed. Logically, it should be like that." I asked. "The child's testimony said there was a room with no windows, right? If you ask the police in more detail, you'll know. The window was hidden from the inside. From the outside, it would be obvious that this house is highly suspicious. However, the same incident happened a second, third, and fourth time. Maybe from the police's perspective, the culprit sealed the windows so the children wouldn't remember the view outside. That's why they investigated the wrong direction. Another thing is," Takahashi continued, "the nearby residents never reported this house to the police. Isn't that to prevent the children from remembering the area?" Takahashi said, spouting an unfamiliar term. "Simply put, people with this condition become much more sunburned than ordinary people, even with a little exposure to ultraviolet light. Depending on the trigger of photosensitivity, the symptoms vary. Anyway, the original owner of this room should have been a photosensitive person. Sound. I thought it was some kind of prank or supernatural phenomenon, but after all of this, I realized it was something more, something pulling me toward that house. I didn't know how to explain it. Maybe I had been subconsciously led there, or maybe the knocking had been a signal, but I couldn't deny that the events unfolded in a way that seemed almost predestined." Kang Jun, with his eyes wide, leaned forward as I recounted every detail, from the knocking that first drew me to the old house, to finding the cellar and the bodies of the mother and child. The discovery sent chills down my spine all over again. Takahashi had been the one to make the post online, sharing what we had found, though he had left out many personal details. His method had ensured that the police would be alerted, but not in a way that would directly tie us to the scene. "I can't believe this," Kang Jun said, eyes gleaming with excitement. "This is huge. You guys really found the bodies, and you didn't even think of calling the police directly? What about that?" Takahashi, still lying on the folding bed with his eyes half closed, shrugged. "Sometimes, it's better to let others handle the messy details. We didn't need to make ourselves part of the story. The police will figure it out, but they'll have to work for it." Kang Jun, who had been pacing excitedly, paused. "But what if they don't? What if they get confused? We could have been there to help them right away." Takahashi raised a hand to silence him, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. "Let them figure it out. It's not our responsibility to bring down the walls." As Takahashi spoke, I couldn't help but feel a deep unease. There was something unsettling about the way he casually dismissed the implications of what we'd discovered. Yes, the knocking had led me to that house, but there was still so much I didn't understand about what had truly happened there. I glanced at Kang Jun, who was still caught up in the excitement of it all. "You should rest too," I said, trying to shake off the lingering tension from the day. "This has been a lot to process, but I don't think I can handle another round of this right now." Takahashi's comment echoed in my mind. The mother has always been protecting her sick son. She wants to keep him away from all dangers, even after death. His words felt heavy, almost too much to bear. Kang Jun sat down, his enthusiasm waning just slightly. "Yeah, you're right. It's been a crazy day." He smiled, though there was a tiredness in his eyes. "But hey, you guys really did it. You found the truth." I nodded slowly, but a deep knot formed in my chest. I had heard the knocking sound, and now I had seen what it led to. The mother and son were no longer living, but they remained hidden in that house, locked away from the world. Could I really accept the fact that we had uncovered their secret? Could I turn away from it? I looked back at Takahashi, who was now half asleep on the bed. He had done what I couldn't, kept his distance from the emotional weight of the situation. I wanted to ask him more, to understand his perspective better, but the words just wouldn't come. The knocking sound had led me to the house, and now I wondered if it would ever stop echoing in my mind.